So from last week, we had a couple of to-dos outstanding. The first one I want to talk about is the Connectathon. Dan is not on the call, but he did post a poll. So everybody go vote in the poll. I'm not actually 100% sure. I know what the track entails. Maybe Graham can give some light here. But if we do, I'm trying to understand what the requirements or the commitment level is for us for a breakout session. That might be something that's a little lower commitment for us rather than like a full-blown track the second week of January. Graham, or anyone, is that like a couple of hours, or what do they breakout sessions usually look like?
I think it's free format.
Free format, anything you like.
Yeah, you just if it's gonna be like virtual, so the Zoom link, and
Right.
I don't know if people, maybe they're gonna be the schedule for other breakout sessions. So I think the main problem not to intersect with others.
Yeah, breakout sessions are organized by the hour, but in particular in a virtual format, who knows when, how many hours you want to have and how many hours people will turn up for. Like Nikolai says, the big problem for me is there's constant competition for time, and Josh and others will be the same. But I won't be there, by the way. I'm in the bush during the Connectathon.
Let's just continue to discuss it on the channel. I personally am sort of leaning towards that option. It's sort of a little bit lighter weight for us. I think it'll be more focused. Maybe we have like 1 hour intro session, 1 hour workshopping, something like that, a little more structure rather than 2-3 whole days on Zoom. I think that's pretty.
Yeah, as we discussed, we probably can prepare some demos and show what we have from implementation point of view. I think that that would be nice to demonstrate people that we are, have something working. We can talk about tests and reference implementation. I don't know, Josh maybe can have a short and the spec by themselves.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's what I mean, like it's kind of a focused agenda, that's compressed, not just across the whole couple of days, or maybe we have like a couple of these. So let's discuss it in the channel. That's just my personal opinion. So I want to see what other people have to say about that.
And another event, so I was invited to HL7 Europe. It's gonna happen like 15 January in Athens, Greece. So, and I already organized the SQL on FHIR like session. So if anybody want to visit Greece in January, so join me. Welcome. I don't think there will be a lot of people, but it's HL7 Europe. I don't know, Graham, do you know anything about this HL7 Europe meeting in January?
Well, it's actually my fault.
So that's I was told about this by Rene from FHIR, and then the French guys who are writing tests told me that they are going to Greece for HL7 Europe, and this is going to be non-virtual, like offline meetings.
So the context was at the affiliates meeting in Phoenix. I suggested that
make Europe meeting.
The opportunity for a virtual meeting was a great opportunity for international affiliates to coordinate and have a pre-meeting to encourage people who wouldn't usually attend an HL7 meeting to attend because it's virtual. And so I encouraged the affiliates to do planning meetings to bring people in to do the virtual meeting. And then the Europeans looked and said, hey, well, we're already going to be in Greece in a couple of weeks before, so let's just do it there. So then they're having an in-person working meeting, planning working group meeting, and doing some European stuff in the lead-in to the virtual meeting. So basically, the original idea was to encourage participation in the virtual meeting, and which I'm trying to get one off the ground in Asia as well. Not an in-person meeting, a virtual meeting in Asia. So that's kind of where it came from, and they're doing connectathons and project meetings around European projects and planning for the main meeting.
So at least I will present this SQL on Fire for European HL7 guys in Greece, and you're welcome to join.
That'd be great. Yeah. It's January 15th, so it's like literally right before.
It's better look for dates, but I think, yeah, my session is in January 15 or 16, something like this. I can send in Zulip the exact information in the schedule.
Yeah, definitely do that. And I think, this will be a good opportunity for us to, put together a presentation around it, and certainly, help you out and collaborate on that as well. Sort of our first, like, we've just been in a room talking, but, the first sort of presentational aspect of that for external folks or interested folks. So, okay, great. Yeah, let's get those specific dates, because unfortunately, I will not be going to Greece, although I'd love that. But I know some other folks who might be interested. So
I think we don't have a quorum, so we can discuss maybe some topics for people here. I don't know. Maybe Aaron can tell us what's going on in Databricks. So have you started implementing SQL on Fire spec, or just thinking about this?
Yeah, so we have an open source solution called DB Ignite, and it was started a little bit before I got to Databricks. And it was really focused on a FHIR-to-OMOP translation. And so that was my peer, Amir Kermani, had worked on that, and he comes from a life sciences background. My background with Aetna was we were doing all types of transactions, 837 Is and Ps, 278s. And so the way we approached our open source solution is to say we want to be able to support all types of transactions, because if you look at a specific FHIR-to-OMOP mapping, it's not a one-to-one correlation. So the idea is a lot of payers, a lot of providers have had data models for the past 50 years because they've been very analytical. And so we're here to try to support all those permutations, including SQL on Fire. So we have a solution where we allow you to write some analytics to say, if I wanted to identify a prior auth, how do I determine what resources are in my bundle? And then once I know that, then I know how to approach and maybe build a data model from there for reading. We're aiming towards putting some examples of how to write Fire in Databricks and Spark as well. And we're also looking at some no-code solutions of how do I start to infer mappings between different data models, knowing that, we know some of the metadata definitions. We know that, for example, like a patient given name is an array of strings, but that should be able to be mapped to, typically in a database, you'd have just a first name as a string. So rather than having to map an array of a string to a string, how do you start to automate some of those processes to make that definitions and implications without having to write code? So we're kind of going down that path. But yeah, definitely deeply involved in the SQL on Fire movement as well.
So can you send the link to your project? Is how it's called, a DB Ignite, or?
Yeah, it's it was named before I got here. But I'll post the link here in the chat. But just an open source project.
Because I see on Databricks some Fire connector, even this page. Yes, that's what you're working on.
Yeah, there's the FHIR-to-OMOP, and probably if you look outside of GitHub, that's kind of the original version of FHIR-to-OMOP. And then on GitHub, we've included FHIR-to-OMOP as like a subsidiary of the primary work. We took for example, we took all the definitions from HL7 International from their JSON schema and mapped it all into Spark schemas. So there's like something like 900,000 lines of metadata for all the 157 resources we mapped in. So we're trying to get to the point where it's easy to read and write Fire on the platform.
Are you aware of Bunson project, which was done by Ryan before he joined Google?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And
yeah,
I think I know the guys in Google still moving this forward, like Bunson stuff.
Oh, okay. Did it get mapped or migrated? Because I think and maybe I'm thinking of it wrong. One of the GitHub repos were archived for Bunson.
Probably yes. I think it's split because, like, puzzling, I think it's a kind of fork of Bunson.
Okay.
And I know the guys in Google still doing like some Bunson fork. I'm not sure about exactly what are repos and what stuff, but
Okay, under Cerner, right? Cerner, Bunson.
It was started under Cerner, but then now as I know, it lives under like Puzzling and under Google. Google has open source tools.
Yeah. Is it Google's
Parquet and other stuff? But I think guys will join us. They are definitely in, I don't know, in a group. So if you write, so you can coordinate. Because for me, it's kind of similar stuff. Yeah, what you're doing is still Parquet files, schemas, and all this stuff. So
for sure.
And we even discussed that we probably can standardize the Parquet schema for FHIR, because, for example, there was idea that bulk export can be done in Parquet, and that may simplify a lot of stuff. Like,
yeah, we've tried to avoid, like, just quickly looking at Bunson. I'm familiar with like Happy FHIR as well from like Smile CDR. We tried to avoid like hard coding classes and hard coding schemas other than the translation from HL7 International, to try to make it as repeatable as possible with as little code as possible. And the metadata is just the metadata of the HL7 International schema. So yeah, but I'd be interested to see kind of, when some of the other folks join, kind of see what their approaches are and some of their thoughts behind it, because we've definitely taken a look at some of the open source ones as well to see how do we make this easy to work with, because as of today, it's fairly hard to do.
And is your FHIR-to-OMOP solution working in production, or it was experimental?
Well, so that's a great question. So if you took every FHIR bundle and said, let's map it, like, for example, take every claim resource and map it to an encounter, that'd be a wrong data model. Because do I know my FHIR bundles are representing claims or like a prior auth? A prior auth has a claim resource. So unless I understand there's like a service request item behind it to say, here's a surgery, a pharmacy request or a DME request, like, you just can't take a direct mapping. So the answer is we have a FHIR-to-OMOP mapping done for CCDA records. But the question is, like, like, as you have different permutations of that, we don't want to solve every permutation. That's the equivalent of like solving every healthcare organization's data model. So that's a very ominous task. But for CCDAs, yes, that's what we have for FHIR-to-OMOP.
And if I could plant a seed in your head, Aaron, I think a lot of folks would be interested in the work Databricks has done in FHIR-to-OMOP, but in all this in general. So, in terms of show and tells and implementations and things like that, like, if you could even think about putting together, a short presentation on that, maybe 5-10 minutes, I think people would be really interested.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do so. I present on this as is, like, probably twice a week to customers. So like, it's, we do this fairly regularly. So yeah, would be happy to.
Yeah, so that potentially for something like the Connectathon, where we might have at the beginning like sort of a show and tell implementation kind of session. We did that last time, and I thought it was really useful. We just went around the room and folks talked about their implementations, no matter where they are or what their approaches were. But it was just really great to learn from each different implementation at that stage.
Yep, absolutely.
That'd be awesome.
I would be happy to. That'd be exciting.
Actually, going and looking at these old to-dos, Nikolai, you have some to-dos on CI/CD tests.
Yeah. So I'm trying to push in our engineers to start like implementing that stuff, and hope they will join and start publishing test results. So then we can get back to that moment.
Yeah, I'll keep them there. Obviously, we're making good progress on that, and maybe the Connectathon could be another push for that.
Connectathon could be very nice milestone to get to some point, with the tests.
I think that's all I had. I don't have anything else specifically for the group. I mean, in my view, and based on the conversations we've been having the past couple of weeks, I think, I'm really interested in the different use cases that we're talking about. Particularly, Graham, you're talking about, use cases using view definitions that are really quite different from the standard, SQL analytics use case, those ideas. So that's something that I think we should really start to hone in on, sketch out, because I think it'll have a real effect on the specification itself and implementations. Like, those use cases are really going to inform that other conversations that we're having around recursion, levels of recursion, approach to that, and then in potentially like incremental incremental type of implementations that have different levels. And that was that whole intent conversation. So I think we're focusing on, areas that are going to be really important and salient for the spec and implementations. But I think the missing step here is to understand those sort of non-core might not be the right terminology, but non-traditional SQL analytics use cases. How does that sound to you, Graham?
I think the use cases are, genuine and important, but I'm not sure that they should influence the spec very much. It's the tail wagging the dog in essence. Because I think that they're not anywhere near as important and relevant as main use cases for which SQL and FHIR and the view definition are intended.
I think
they're worth writing up and documenting. I think that there could be a section in the spec for, kind of implementations of runners that there are and why people have done or would do that. And you would obviously, the main one is to generate SQL, but then there's, other uses.
I think those will inform our thinking about things like, we were talking about the enum for intent, right? And things like that. That's what I see these types of use cases informing, right? Does that making sense there?
Sure, they do. And I mean, we were just talking about the OMOP one before. The OMOP one is, like, from my point of view, the main challenge with the OMOP view is the terminology normalization. So you need a really solid terminology service implementation in the FHIR-path engine that you wouldn't call on in a database scenario, like a view for analytical purposes, normal analytical purposes. So, like, that one stands out to. We had a Connectathon in Australia yesterday, and a group of us got talking about view definition and OMOP, and that one really stood out as a challenge for implementers. And Onto Server team were in the discussion, John as well, and so we maybe do some work on that.
What is a specific challenge, Graham, in this mapping, like terminology from FHIR to OMOP?
When OMOP concepts in the tables that you create as you migrate the data from FHIR to OMOP, the concepts all get assigned an OMOP concept ID, and that's a central assigned ID that's created from mapping tables. Nobody, I think, pretty sure nobody uses OMOP concept IDs in their resources. So part of the ELT from FHIR to OMOP is to look up the concept ID that applies, and then there's a default like a 0, I think it's 0, if it's not available. So you generate a table with both the original code and also the concept ID. And the concept ID is basically looking up a mapping. And so it's a terminology API. So you have the terminology API to do that, and you have the mappings that published through OMOP, and we've described how they appear in the terminology API. You just have to, like, string all the pieces together, and then in your view definitions, you'll have to actually, like, transform. So you can do it through the terminology service API, and that's, I think, the bigger of the challenges in an OMOP view definition. And it's possible. There's a little bit of tricky stuff around didn't find a mapping, or found multiple mappings based on multiple codings provided in a codable concept. That we may actually need to do some specific stuff for that. So I'm really interested in any OMOP work, and we'll try and follow anything that Aaron has to say. about actual experience with using view definition to generate OMOP.
That to me qualifies as like another interesting use case, right? That we fleshed
Very
out. So
interesting.
I'm gonna assign the to-do to you, Graham. But obviously there's gonna be a collaboration with lots of folks.
Yeah.
I'm kind of, given the interest here, and again, like I said before, there's interest. I've heard of interest from other parties as well. Like that might be a good topic for the Connectathon, because people will be there. So that might be something that we advertise a little bit. Like we're going to talk about FHIR-to-OMOP. So let's get some of those FHIR-to-OMOP folks who are working on it from some of the other working groups to join up in this. So I think that's an agenda item idea for the Connectathon.
I think
can
it
follow up on
can
that.
be done even without Connectathon, because my idea just bring all people who like work it with OMOP and get together and make some presentation and then discuss, yes, like share the ideas. So that may be like it could be like SQL on FHIR meeting which dedicated to OMOP, or we can like create another one. I don't think why we should stick it to the Connectathon. So
well, I think we could do that as well, but the Connectathon just gives it like a moment where people are aware, they're available, people know that the sessions are happening and that kind of thing. It's just kind of a scheduling thing, right? So we can of course add another meeting, but we'll have to talk to folks. So it just seems like a good place to land at least a first conversation around that.
Because for me, it's still like, so I have a friends who did like conferences and where they go all online. So for me, it's still the question, if you go online, why you should get people for 3, 4, 5 hours and sitting in front of laptop? You can do it every day, like TV show, yeah, like couple of hours every day instead of like taking.
It's easier for people to organize a block than
or it's just a habit, I think it's easier to organize something small. Yeah,
no. Wait till you have teenage kids. You'll find out.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of trying to square that circle with the Connectathon, is make like specific blocks for constrained pieces of time for an agenda. Like I don't think these 8-hour days for 3 days on Zoom is gonna work for anybody. So that's why I want to set like, all right, 1 hour at the beginning, we talk about implementations, 1 hour, talk about SQL generation, 1 hour, we talk about OMOP. That's how I'm seeing it. But people have probably blocked out those couple of days, at least some part of them, to be involved in this. So that's how I see it. Like less formality of a track, but a little bit of structure, kind of like having a bunch of our meetings just kind of back to back in the middle of a week. All right, well, if there's nothing else from folks, yeah, so happy Thanksgiving. If you celebrate or not, you should, because it's the best holiday. So I'm also thankful for our group.
Okay, see you next week.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Thanks.
Sounds great.
See you next week.